Hey there, my name is Rachel Giger, and welcome to the Magdala podcast. We at Magdala know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem. The need for women to be accompanied in the journey towards healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here. Magdala exists as a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom alongside each other from sexual addiction. Our goal is to supply you with support, community, and accountability. Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to dialogue about how to heal and live fully as a Catholic woman. Wherever you are in your journey, know that you're not alone, and we welcome you to this table. Yeah, I say like and way too much, especially if I'm nervous. I will definitely I say like I'll pause and say I sound like a troll.
I like it when you do your weird little noises where you're like or something.
Yeah,
I'm like, did she choke on an ice cube or
no,
what's going on?
I mean, sometimes I gotta buy myself time. I gotta buy myself time, and
I do that sometimes when I start singing my words slowly. I'll be like, let me think for a second.
Right, your brain moves too fast for your thoughts. Well, yeah, it's fine. We can't all have speech and debate where we learn not to say like and Although I did do speech and debate, and I was good at it, but I never got corrected for saying like and that didn't serve me well as an adult. Now that I know.
Well, it's never too late. And some things you will always do imperfectly, like my falling intonation. Just so y'all know, our listeners out there know, that's what started this conversation, is that Mary Jo lets the ends of her sentences trail off, which apparently I did not know is called falling intonation. Yeah, it's a big no-no. Not just for speakers, but like actors and stuff. So I got picked on a lot for this when I was doing plays and musicals.
Ooh. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm not re-traumatized or anything. I am thinking about the one
wins.
There was one play director who was just micromanaged every little movement that you make on stage. And when you get these kind of directors, you're like, why the
flippity flip.
Why the heck am I doing something creative and artistic so I can get on the stage so you can tell me exactly what to do?
I had micromanaging directors too, and they are a nightmare. I agree.
You can never get through a single scene. They'll stop you after 5 seconds. No. Your hand should be just so on his shoulder.
It's like, do you want to get up here and play this role?
Right.
Do you?
Right.
Get up here. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and introduce our topic for today, and introduce you, our guest, our lovely guest. Okay, so just for our listeners today, we asked our followers on Patreon, donors, our supporters, that's the word I'm looking for. We asked our supporters on Patreon a while back what podcast topics they would like to see, and one suggestion that I love is like, what does freedom look like or feel like? What is freedom from addiction? What does it look like? How do I know if I'm there? And I thought that was a beautiful topic, and so I brought in the best person that I thought of for this topic, even though we were going to do other topics, but now we're doing freedom, so here we are. But we've got Mary Jo Carney today. She is one of our small group moderators and helps edit our small group guide, basically. So she does a ton of brain work for us. But Mary Jo and I also go way back in the anti-porn work.
Oh yeah. Or from back in the early days.
Yes. And ran a group on campus and started a whole thing. But anyway, so we don't have any sort of script or questions on freedom. It's just more like, you and I are both in recovery or recovered. And we've also both been active in ministry in this topic for several years. So we've gotten a lot of, I guess, glimpses into different stages of freedom and the particulars, the ins and outs, the awkward parts, all of the stuff. But so just explain maybe for our listeners, like a little bit of your own story, how you arrived
doing work on this topic and just what you love about it. Let's start there.
Yeah, so my name's Mary Jo, also known as Josie by many. And I kind of came into pornography at a sensitive period of my life. I was entering into puberty. And, you know, like with anyone else, there was some other factors at play, family dysfunction, you know, the normal. Yeah. Things got worse for me over the years, and porn was kind of my drug of choice, which was really funny. Throughout high school, I definitely prided myself on being somebody that wasn't going out and getting drunk, wasn't like testing out drugs or using marijuana. You know, I went to a school that was really like right on the edge of the ghetto. So I experienced all these things from afar. Like I saw them in my classmates. But I knew that they were not right to do. So I avoided those. And I was using a drug the whole time. Yeah. But mine was different. It was pornography. And totally unbeknownst to anyone in my family or friends, of course. Yeah. It was not until college that I was able to confess about it to a friend that knew that something was off. A lot of things were off, but that was what I chose to tell her. We used Covenant Eyes accountability for a year, which is really what caused me to like cold turkey, not to be addicted to it. Yeah. And so ever since then, I've been in recovery. That was after my first year of college that I did that cold turkey.
Praise God.
And, you know, since having that cold turkey period, there have been setbacks. But
I think that's realistic.
Yes.
In almost any recovery story.
Most of us do. Yeah. But there has not been addiction since then. And there's been, we'll get into it, but there's been like different phases of recovery as well. Yeah. Different things that I held up to motivate me that I would find out at a certain point were not enough. You know, they worked for a time, and then you always are digging deeper and asking yourself, what is motivating me to fight for love in this way? Right. And that's what, you know, can help you to have recovery over the long term. That and excellent accountability friends, which I'm so blessed to have. So so that's a little bit about my story with pornography. And
then you and I met. When did we meet? You transferred.
I was a junior transfer to Ave. Right. And it was going into my senior year that you were starting the group. And I don't even know. It was one of those things where somebody who knew a little bit about my story with porn, some close friend of mine was like, yeah, Rachel is starting a group for that. And they were like, you should really get in touch with her. And I just immediately knew. I was like, I really want to help with that. And it didn't seem like you had anyone else that really wanted to help with that. And this is not something that you can go it alone. Like it's a very challenging topic and a very challenging fight to handle especially because no one else really at that time and still today was doing very much about it for women. Yeah. I mean, I remember when we were starting our group, I looked for I looked into Sexaholics Anonymous, and I looked into all these ministries for men, but where for women? No curriculum, no program, no guidelines. And then I pretty much just sat back in awe as I watched you write one, which was so good. It's such a great curriculum, which is why I love to be the manual editor or whatever we're going to call me. Thank you. Because I just love reading through all of that thematic material and then thinking about the questions that our women bring to the table, right? And making sure that everything gets addressed. You know, as a question queen myself, I call myself. I love questions.
Right.
That's very important to me, that we try to cover the basis for these women that are coming to us with so many deep-seated personal questions that will alter their lives and their futures. And so that's been the gift to me of working with you for the past couple of years.
Oh, it's been,
and working with the women is just uncovering these beautiful source of mysteries and conundrums, and learning more about ourselves as we go.
Yeah, agreed. I think you and I both experienced this, and I think I speak for both of us when I say, like, leading a group, like ministering in this space, only brought more freedom. Like, I think I get that question all the time, and I'm sure you do as well. It's like, you know, doesn't this trigger you, or doesn't this make it more difficult or whatever? And it's never done that. I mean, there's times when there are details or stories that are heavy. You know, they're heavy to bear, and that's when you kind of just have to lay them at the foot of the cross, or when your own story becomes heavy again. But I've only seen more freedom come from speaking about it and ministering and all of these things, and just like throwing that beacon onto this and being like, all right, we're not going to leave this in a dark corner anymore. There's only been more freedom in that. And also getting to watch other women be set free. Mm-hmm. That is just continually inspiring. And it's a reminder of, whoa, wait, this was done for me. Like, I've experienced this, and I'm living from this, and I forget to be grateful.
Right.
And I forget to actually live from it. Because, you know, a lot of times we still get caught up in that shame, and, you know, that we're just a piece of junk. But no, like, freedom, it evolves, and we forget about it often.
What a great point. Yeah, I have seen women sometimes in my group experiencing that initial high, that joy high of freedom from a pornography addiction, or, you know, whatever related compulsion it may be, masturbation, fantasizing. We see a lot.
We address all of them.
Yeah, we'll take anyone.
The whole gamut. Bring it on.
Related to sex, you're welcome.
Let's go.
Come on in. And yeah, sometimes you see that, their freedom and their joy, and you're like, wow. And then, you forget that, like, you already had this too. Like, that's where you're living out of, and that's why you're leading a group. Right. But that's so true. I've only ever felt more free as a result of leading group, because if you have a temptation and you're just out there going it alone, like, it might suck to have a setback or whatever. But when you're leading a pack, it's like, you got to be strong for the pack.
No, yeah. That's so real.
And what could be a better motivation? Because what is the nature of love? To lay down your life for someone else.
Right.
You know? And so it's definitely, if anything, just solidified my recovery over the past couple of years, and taught me so many new things through these women who are all, like, just as brilliant, if not more, than I am.
And the women we had together at Ave, holy cow. Like, I remember leaving the first meeting and telling my roommates when I got back, and obviously I didn't share names or anything, but they knew that I was leading the group, and they were like, you know, how is it? And I was like, y'all, like, we got some giants in there, man, who this is their secret thing that they've kept, and it's so clearly holding them back from an incredible life. So just to even be in that space with them and just be like, all right, let's remove this obstacle together so you can be the powerhouse that you are. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. But I think also we've seen in group dynamics, and I want to do a whole episode on why group accountability is the way to go. But I always say that in every podcast episode. I'm like, I want to do a whole episode on this, but I'll say 2 things about it right now. But just how, when you start to recover for other people, like, not just yourself, when you start to say, my falls matter to the other women in this circle, and my falls, you know, matter to God, but that's hard to grasp when we don't have the carnal thing in front of us. Like, my falls matter to God, and they matter to other people, and my victories matter to other people. Yes. When I achieve, like, let's say I achieve a week without looking at porn, the person I'm in this support group with, like, all of a sudden thinks, I can go a week without. If she can, I can. We've been sitting in this group together for months. If she can do it, I can do it, right? And so I think we got to see how contagious freedom is. Freedom is contagious. It's like, this is, when you start to not hinge your story on other people, but when you start to let your story matter and your recovery matter to people and their recovery matter to you, that's when the freedom kind of takes hold. Because we also want to avoid, I think there's a mindset with coming in to lead a small group, and especially now with Magdala, it's, I think leading a group will help me recover. And I think that's dangerous, because I think it's like, okay, you want to make sure you're in a place that's safe, where you are safe to be leading others. And you don't want to hinge your recovery on being a leader. If you're still really, really actively struggling, you need to be in a place of reception, of freedom. Not, chasing after it, grasping it, white knuckling it. You need to be in a place of receiving freedom. So I think it's important when you're leading a group to be already, having been in that place of freedom. Now you get to help others be in that place. But it's a complex thing, because freedom also looks different for everybody, which is part of why I like this question, though, of what does freedom look like? Because, we could talk for hours. Like, what freedom looks like for you is different than what freedom looks like for me. But I guess just talk about that. What does your porn-free life look like? What changed?
Okay, well, in general, not even porn related, to me, freedom is almost kind of like a mental space. We live in such a fast-paced and full world. We're saturated with so many, my like hypersensitivity is going to come out here. That's me personally, but we live in such a saturated world with our senses. Constantly taking in like news, sights, sounds, like it's overwhelming. And also all the lives around us, it can be overwhelming. But when you have freedom, there is like a space in your mind and your heart and your soul and your consciousness for reflecting on what is good and what is true and what is beautiful. Like to me, that's freedom.
Yeah.
To me, freedom is when you're with another person and you're actually able to like see the good that they are and receive it and experience it.
Yeah.
Because that's your only like MO for that time that you're with that person,
Right.
And the same with all your life. You're able to take in what is being given to you with a spirit of like trust and a spirit of surrender to God and a spirit of joy. And that goes for everything, whether it's a joy or a suffering that's coming to you. We have both in life.
Right.
To me, that's what freedom is. And I would say that for my recovery, freedom was definitely the point that I reached where I realized, wow, okay, even if I have a setback, it's not the end of the world. If you want to talk about freedom from sexual compulsion or addiction,
right,
in the psychological terms, that's going to be different than what I just described. It's very subjective.
Right.
And we can talk about that. Totally up for that.
Yeah.
But I love psychology.
Yes.
But in subjective terms, like a phenomenological view, I would say that's kind of what freedom feels like.
Yeah.
As a person, is just the space to
encounter
others and yourself in a way that is true.
Yeah.
In a way that's compassionate and honest. To experience your failures not as the end of the world, but as something that actually is possibly good for you and allowed by God, because it's good for you, right? Every setback that I've ever had after my cold turkey recovery has just brought me closer and closer to this like baseline humility that is so necessary for me to actually understand like this age-old question of like, who am I? And God, who are you?
Yeah.
It's been so necessary for me to have that true humility, which is to rejoice with the good things, to accept the bad things, and just to see myself as I am.
And receive mercy in that place. Because I think when you're in addiction, it's so hard to... When you are actively addicted, it is hard to visualize mercy or just make mercy tangible. But I think when you're in that space of freedom, you know, mercy becomes a lot more tangible, oddly enough. Like you start falling forward, like instead of falling backward. Or what do we used to say in group? It was like, you stepped back in the puddle, you're not drowning in the ocean, you know? Like a setback is a setback, and all of us are subject to setback. But I think I think it's Thomas Merton who says this, that like only love is actually free. Like only charity is free. Everything else is a chain. Like everything, if it's not driven by love, it is a chain, right? Yeah. It's driven by fear or selfishness or insecurity or whatever. But and addiction is such a chain, but not because it is in itself. It's because it's driven by something that chains you. But only love is free. And so when you're free, it doesn't mean you're loving perfectly at all. But it just means you are free to begin loving in a way that is tangible and real and receptive of mercy and receptive of yourself, kind of like you're pointing out. You can love yourself as you are, setbacks and all. You can love God as he is, can love others as they are and appreciate who they are without this tainted image in the back of your mind of what all three of those things are, what God is, what I am, or who God is, who I am, and who other people are. Because addiction just taints the picture of everything. But there's the quote from St. Catherine of Siena, I need this as a determined cleric woman all the time. Which, like, for our listeners, this is like one of the biggest things that Mary Jo and I relate to each other on, is like, how do I exist as a cleric Catholic woman who's determined and opinionated, you know, sometimes too opinionated, but
sassy, brilliant. What can I say? So brilliant and so humble
all the time, every day. But there's a quote from that our Lord says to St. Catherine of Siena. I think it's in the dialogues, but he says, I am he who is, and you are she who is not. And it's powerful. It's powerful. But I think that's
simple.
Yeah. But that is freedom, is recognizing I am not.
Yep.
I am not. I am not capable of obtaining or maintaining my own freedom.
No.
But he is. And so there's a much more realistic picture. I wouldn't say you necessarily feel, or at least in my freedom, I haven't necessarily felt strong. I haven't felt like, you know, this powerhouse of a person. I haven't felt undefeatable. I've actually felt oftentimes like my freedom is quite fragile, you know? And
precious.
And precious. Yeah, that's a better word for it than fragile, I think. But just because it's not my own. It was given to me.
Yeah.
And
grace.
And receiving it with gratitude and for as long as it lasts, you know, which you hope is the rest of your life, and you work hard to make sure it's the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
But that it is precious. It is delicate. It is, it's strong, but it's, you know, it's sensitive. And I think that's a realistic picture. But get into the psychology of freedom a little bit. What does it look like? Because you're our guru.
Oh, no. She called me a guru.
Just kidding. No. None of us are
Tony
gurus.
Robbins, I am not your guru.
I am not your guru. No. No, I'm just kidding. You're not a guru. I'm not a guru. None of us are gurus. Like, the fact that we're just, you know, pressing record and, like, quite frankly, shooting the shit. Like, neither of us are gurus.
Yep. Like, I just rolled into town a couple hours ago.
And we're like,
hey,
let's record.
Passion through Nashville. Let's just talk.
Let's record a podcast on freedom. Okay. And also in the back of my head, the scene from Braveheart, you know, it's like the freedom. Like, it's like going in the back.
Do you want freedom, men? Do you want freedom? Oh my gosh. My parents let me watch Braveheart as like a 5-year-old child.
That's probably not.
I don't know what they were thinking, but it definitely left an effect on me. I was like, do I want freedom?
Does freedom look like getting castrated?
Right. If that's freedom, you know what? I'll be really happy here, chained up at home. Thank you so much. I don't want to wear a kilt either. So
the kilt thing's a little intimidating. Anyway, so psychologically, what does freedom look like? You know, at a base level, what are we free from when we're free from addiction? 'Cause it's our compulsion, right?
Yeah. So I oftentimes, let's talk language. In my groups, I will oftentimes use the language sexual compulsion because this is just an umbrella term.
Yeah.
That makes sure that none of our girls feel left out, because every single one has a unique combination, you know? Mm-hmm. Some of them just have one thing that they're fighting against. Some of them have just pornography, just masturbation, just acting out in relationships.
I do the same thing. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
You want to make sure
some of them have combinations. Some of them have 2 combinations. Some of them have 3 things, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Whatever it is, it's fine. We're going to, you know, the reason why we keep our curriculum thematic in nature is so that it can cover all the bases.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, our goal for all of our girls is just that the frequency of whatever it is that's going on in their lives would be reduced. That is an actual goal that we do have for the girls. I mean, we're a ministry, and so we do talk in these spiritual terms, and we focus on the themes.
We're not
because
clinicians.
because that's our area. We're not clinicians, right?
Right.
However, it is our goal to reduce maladaptive behaviors. Mm-hmm. That's what brings these women to the group, and that's our goal. And so at the beginning of the group, it's been my practice, at least, to sort of ask the girls to take account in some way for themselves. What is the frequency that they currently have? And then at the close of the group, we always administer a little survey, and we actually do ask them to quantify for us, you know, how many times per day, per week, per month were you engaging in this behavior? And at this point now, what would you say it is? And I mean, praise God, like most of these women have reported a decrease, and some of them quite significant.
Yeah. Or a reduction in behavior.
Quite significant.
Yep.
So that's certainly the goal. You know, I've actually spent the past 2 years as an entry-level registered behavior technician.
Yep.
So in that sense, I actually can talk a little bit about maladaptive behavior and, you know, how do we handle that? How do we conquer it? Which I don't know if that's part of the question, but yeah,
it can be. Question can be whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because our goal is to help them to reduce it. And our goal is, I guess this is also for our supporters, so they might want to know this. And we also do have them make like concrete freedom plan.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Which they make for themselves. So they have to choose specifically what are their replacement behaviors going to be. Because in general, if you have a bad habit, a bad behavior, and you're saying, okay, slap the wrist, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, it's not really going to be effective. What you need is something that's going to replace it. And ideally, something that's going to replace it in such a way that it would be impossible to do whatever that maladaptive behavior is at the same time as the replacement behavior. Mm-hmm. For example, I would really like to watch pornography right now, but instead I'm going to call my accountability buddy.
Yeah.
Could you watch it while calling your accountability? I mean, you could, but
realistically speaking,
you're definitely not going to do that. And ideally, your accountability partner is someone that you love and trust, someone that you're going to have a great conversation with. You're going to leave it feeling
edified and seen.
Much better than you would have felt if you watched a porno.
Right.
So that's sort of on the psychological plane. That's our goal of freedom for the girls, is reducing the maladaptive behaviors. You know, and we'll probably get into, you know, the topic of addiction. I think we're going to do a separate podcast. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, I'll just say that, you know, the psych community is definitely hesitant to call sexual addiction a true and real phenomenon.
It's so true. Yeah.
For many reasons. But the way that we see it, it's just like any other addiction.
And I think there's growing recognition. I was reading an article the other day about that, just within the psych community. I think we still have a ton of work to do, but I think there's growth in that area, in the sense that too many clinicians have seen, whether or not their opinion is that pornography is immoral, right? Like, they have seen the negative effects of addictions to pornography or other sexual compulsions. They've seen it negatively affect their clients. And they also see the tie between that and other addictive behaviors that, and they're, instinctively related. I think, because I think there's a lot about freedom in the psych arena. And the specifics I think are hopeful to talk about. But we don't shy away from the psych conversations in Magdala. Like we definitely are not clinicians, but at least some are, if not all of us have gone through therapeutic help.
We've gone through our own personal, I mean, I did like 2.5 years of counseling with several follow-ups.
Yeah, I've done a few rounds myself. And
actually this was kind of the gift of us coming together to start the ministry, was your background in theology and my background studying psychology.
And there's both. And it was very complimentary. And I think we still function largely that way, which is like, okay, we cannot promise healing in these groups. We can't promise recovery.
It's dependent upon their own, what they're going to put into it.
Yeah, you have to decide and you have to prioritize it. But I mean, the freedom is, once you taste it, it's
infectious.
It is. Yeah. And like the other day I was reading a book, and just a regular old novel that I actually picked up in one of those book cabinets in front of somebody's house, the little houses where they put free books.
Those are the
cutest. See one of those and I like beeline across the street. I'm like, I want a book. And I start reading this book, and it's your average run-of-the-mill modern novel, and it's good. It's got some good elements, but I came upon a sex scene, I detected it, and immediately just skipped over. Like, just flipped the 2 pages. And I had a moment. This was this week where I was like, wow, 4 years ago, I could not have taken those 2 pages and flipped them.
Amazing.
And I had no desire to read it. I was like, no. And I think that's also, like, on a psychological level, that's a beautiful piece of freedom, is like, I had a moment of temptation to read it. And because freedom, and this is so important, freedom does not look like freedom from temptation. Even our Lord was not free from temptation, right? Temptation isn't a sin. Mm-hmm. We can be tempted towards all sorts of things that we have very little desire for. And it's kind of the craziness of temptation. But there's like a brief moment of temptation to read it, and I was like, no, and flipped to 2 pages. And I think when you're free of that compulsion, that's a very tangible moment of like, holy cow, this behavior did used to dominate my life. 4 years ago, I could not have turned those pages, but now I can. And I'm grateful. I can turn those pages. This reading experience is much more productive and happy, and my afternoon is much more productive and happy because I can turn those pages now. But I think a lot of women kind of associate freedom with like, okay, when I no longer think about sex at all. And it's like, okay, realistically, you're a human being with a sex drive, and like, you're gonna think about it. And
anybody heard of ovulation?
Exactly. We have to do another my broken record. We have to do a podcast episode on fertility tracking, and because I think
it's so important.
I think our whole leadership team has brought that up at a different point. We're like, are we gonna talk about fertility?
Right. Like, we need to send all of our women through.
Yes, like, go
that training,
learn the Creighton model, and come back.
Charting your cycle, you are just doing yourself a disservice.
Right. But it's such a good point, though, is that, like, you as a human being, you naturally desire sexual relationships or manifestations of good relationships in a sexual sphere. Like, it is not bad for us to desire that. It's what we do. Again, with those desires that matters. That's where we cross into the boundary of sin. If I have a sexual thought pop into my mind about my spouse, it's like, okay, that's not a bad thing. He is my spouse. But if I allow myself to carry out a fantasy, then I've turned him into an object, even if he is my spouse. If I do that with any human being, they're an object. But if a sexual attraction arises, it's like, oh, okay, praise God, everything's working correctly. But I think a lot of women associate, okay, freedom is when I no longer think about sex at all. Right.
I no longer struggle with this. That's funny.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, love.
No.
No. Those are all really good examples. I was trying to think of some too. I think of one thing I used to struggle with was like, I would get attacked in my sleep a lot. I still do. This happened to me.
No, that's real.
This happened to me like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
I'm a very vivid dreamer.
Same.
And when you subject yourself to pornography, the images stick. So sometimes I'll like wake up in the morning and it's not only just like you're dreaming about it, like you're feeling all the feelings in your body. And you're sort of like half awake, half asleep. What am I going to do about this? And I mean, freedom for me has just been like, even when I'm half asleep, I like recognize, okay, this is going on. And I will literally like flip over, sit up, like just start praying Hail Marys immediately. Like that's freedom. Where before I would have like just been like, okay, just like leaned into it, or even like woken up and then let that sort of like lead me down the dark path back to a setback or something.
Yeah. And I think that's a common occurrence.
Yeah.
Whether or not you've been addicted to pornography, but especially if you have, or any other sexual compulsion for that matter, I think dreams becomes a huge place of, I mean, retaliation. Like I think we have consequences of our behavior, but also I think it's a place of attack. Like I really do.
Definitely.
And also, I mean, again, human beings of a particular age especially have a sex drive, and that's going to show up in our dreams. That's going to show up in our sleep. And so it's beautiful that we're not guilty of sin if we have a dream like that.
Yes.
But it can easily become a place of shame and attack and like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah. The initial times that it would happen to me, especially far into my recovery, I was disappointed in myself.
Same. Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
I thought like, man, why is this still on my brain? Like, God, can't you take these memories away from me? Like, please, like begging God, like take him away. But like we mentioned before, God will allow what he allows for our edification, for our holiness. And so if that's your experience one night or waking up early in the morning, you know, just know that you're good. You're beautiful. And that's your opportunity to choose love and to walk away from lust.
And it can be also like a sign of more freedom. It can be like wait a second, I'm not engaging in these behaviors on a constant basis. And so it's got to find another way to get in. It's got to find another avenue. Yeah. And this avenue is actually against my will. I'm not choosing this. It's finding a back door, and I can close this back door too. I can let this back door not bother me. And I think that's something with dreams that I think is super important, is just, recognizing, oh wow, it's just got to find another outlet. And yeah, I remember, like, I love what you're saying. And you've made this point a couple times just about how the Lord can allow setbacks for our own humility. And yeah, and I appreciate your honesty too about like recovery doesn't look like no more setbacks. It looks like several more sometimes after going cold turkey.
Yeah. That was the way it was for me, because when I went cold turkey, it was just the change of habit. It was not a change of heart.
Yeah. And that's often where we have to begin.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'm changing my physical behavior, but it takes a long time for the heart and mind to catch up.
Yeah.
It takes a long time.
Yep.
It's like somebody who smokes cigarettes, you know, typically when somebody's recovering from an addiction to smoking cigarettes, sometimes they still have to roll paper, or they have to chew on something. Yeah. They have to chew gum. You know, they have, like, there's things that they have to do because the craving is still there. And I think
you have like a withdrawal.
Yeah. Oh, you
and it's like, how can you even focus on like all this deep inner heart healing when you're just like distracted by the withdrawal?
Right.
Like, it's very difficult.
And I think we expect, because we see pornography, masturbation, other sexual compulsions as sins in the church, which they are, and we don't deny that ever. But because we see them as sinful, we think that recovery must mean get rid of it as quickly as possible. And I would say that isn't the goal of Magdala even, or just of any recovery. It's like, no, get rid of it as effectively as possible. Yeah. Make sure you are doing the groundwork so that you don't fall in deeper next time.
Exactly. What is going to motivate you, not just today, not just tomorrow, but all your life.
Yes. Freedom needs to be deep and lasting, and we don't want it to be fake or superficial, or, you know, we don't want the cardboard version of freedom. We want real, living, breathing, fleshy freedom, you know, that's integrated into ourselves as human beings. And I remember one of the, I think the last setback I had actually was the day before we launched Pure in Heart at Ave. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was my senior year.
I literally
Yeah.
had like a similar experience. I think like the day before I started leading a group after you left Ave.
Yeah. No, it's like
you always get attacked in those pivotal moments.
Yeah. I mean, I think the next day I was giving a talk with the guy who's running the male counterpart on our campus, and like the day before I had a setback, and I was sitting there, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was freaking out, I freaked out for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I was like, I can't lead this group. I can't start anything. I can't give a talk. And it had been a long time. But then it was like mercy just kind of washed over. I like, just closed the computer and turned on some music and just whipped out my journal and was like, okay, Lord, coming before you, holy cow, what just happened? Am I still equipped to do this? And, I was like, I can't lead and whatnot. And I just felt like the Lord's response was like, okay, no, I literally gave this to you as a reminder that you are not equipped. You are not equipped. Yeah. I am equipped. It's always me who is equipped. You kid, you're unpredictable. You're a loose cannon, right? Like, but I think we need those, especially when we're leading ministries like on these topics, is like, yes, do I hope for the rest of my life I never fall again?
Of course.
Yeah. But is that realistic? Maybe not, and we all will struggle with sexual sin, in some capacity. Even people who never fall into sexual compulsion, like our sexuality is a space where it's easy to, do sacred things and experience sacred things, but it's also a space where, because of that, it's very easy to sin. And so the rest of my life, yes, I hope and pray I never look at anything like that ever again. And I do believe that's actually possible, but realistically, will I never sin in my sexuality ever again? No. I don't think that's realistic. No. And so I think freedom looks like that hope of like, I see how far I've come, but I do see how far I have to go.
Yeah.
I see that heaven is not here. I see that I'm not living it yet, man. Like we're still flawed. And
the moment that you start to think that you've really got a grip on it, that's the moment that it goes to hell. Seriously. Yeah. I was really looking back at my year of leading the group at Ave. I was really struck by the fact that every single meeting I was going to, I just felt like I was just like flew right through the door, didn't really know what I was saying or talking about. Didn't really know like what the heck I was doing. I felt like this every single time. And this was when I had already been co-leading with you for a year.
Yep.
Literally editing the thematic materials myself, very familiar with them, and also very familiar with the sources that you use. There are also books that I've read.
Right.
But still, for some reason, when you show up, you have this strong feeling of like, God is in control here.
Yes.
And you know what? It's actually like the best feeling. And it is that feeling of freedom. It's like you are like, okay, this is going to be my favorite analogy because it's something that I want to do someday, but it's like you're a kiteboarder, you're out there with your surfboard and your kite and the wind is coming. Like these women are just unleashing like what their experiences are and what it's been and what their problems are. Like the winds are strong and you're just out there like coasting on them like holy, and like they pick you up and they drop you down but the whole time, like God is taking care of you and like speaking through you and working through you. And that's exactly how it's meant to be.
Because only He can free anybody and heal anybody. Yeah. And I think when you're free and then when you're in a position of helping others obtain freedom or receive His freedom, like you recognize that. You're like, I don't do jack shiz. Like I really don't. And that's a beautiful space to be in. Like I chose to receive something so far beyond myself. Like Hans Urs von Balthasar talks about in an essay in his Elucidations. He says basically like because God is incarnate, like because our God became man, we get to experience like the grasp of His hand and the grasp of any human hand. And basically we can take hold of another human hand and let it be shaky and let like our hands be shaky because we know we will fall into the hands of God. Like we know there is an unshakable hand that is beneath us always. And like, I love that. And I mean, that's C.S. Lewis echoes it in Narnia. Like when he says in the last battle, it's, you know, fear not, child, we're all between the paws of the true Aslan, you know, like just freedom, I think, is recognizing that like my hand will always be shaky. It doesn't matter how many times I give my testimony or how many podcast episodes we do or how many groups we lead, like our hands will always be a little bit shaky because we are human. We're not God. But freedom is understanding that unshakable hand beneath you. And like, okay, I can have setbacks. I can, you know, fall again. I can love people poorly. I can do all sorts of things, but there's that unshakable hand beneath me, and he gives me permission to be shaky. And so freedom doesn't look like trying to be the unshakable hand. You know, you're not a higher power. It looks like owning your shakiness, being confident in that unshakable hand, and living.
And finding joy in it.
Yes.
That's why I used the kiteboarding analogy, because what could be better than like just letting the wind like take you away?
I love it.
You know, like that's life. It's crazy, and you go different directions that you don't like foresee yourself going in. But yeah, underneath it all, like you're always landing in the hands of God. And so just enjoy the ride.
Yes.
When you start to enjoy your recovery from porn, you're free.
Yeah.
You are free.
That's a good, yeah. When you're like, this is it.
When you're telling someone that you had that problem, but there's a huge smile on your face, you're free.
Amen.
You're free.
Yeah. And I've tried to explain that to people, that there is a joy in speaking about this topic. There is a joy in encountering women in this space. Like, it's heavy, you know, it's a heavy topic, and sometimes that weight definitely comes upon us, I think. But like, I think of our group, like, man, like we had so much fun.
We had so much fun.
We had a ton of fun, and our group chat is still alive and happening, y'all. Like, I think somebody sent a pic in it earlier. They're like, what up? You know, like it is like it's a family. And I was telling one of my groups the other day about that kind of you recover for each other or with each other. Like this is what groups are for, you know, is like only you can choose this for yourself, but you have to let your story start mattering, and you have to let other people's stories start mattering. And I saw all of them nodding and taking that in. And then our group chat afterward lit up, and girls are sending prayers. They're sending, you know, pictures of reflections. Like they are on fire. And because women also, and I think this is really important in female recovery. I think this is different than male recovery. I think male recovery, I mean, I can't really speak to it because I am not a male, nor have I recovered as a male, but I do think there is more. They recover as a brotherhood very beautifully, but there's more to it than that. But women are so relational. And there's no shame in that. There's no like, that's a gift that, and even if we don't feel relational as women, there's something in the heart of women that is relational. Whether or not we're great at expressing that in our own lives or comfortable in that. But when you play into that, because that's what sexual compulsions really get at, is our desire to be relational and to be in relationship with others and to encounter others. When you play into that and be like, oh wait, I'm literally going to turn. We're going to turn this compulsion on its head by making this a space of encounter. Like the very space where we're exploring this compulsion, where we're talking about these topics, we're going to make this a space of encounter and relationship. And there's something so beautiful about watching that, just that flip, because we're helping women, or God in our groups is helping women be free to be women with each other. And there's something so powerful about that.
And this is another need to do a podcast episode about this. But talking about shame, because when you are in the middle of an addiction, any addiction, but especially one of a sexual nature, you are usually deep in shame. Which is this message of like, I am bad. Not just guilt, which is I've done something bad, but that I myself bad. And so that's why the group is what makes the recovery work. That's why it's what makes like our ministry, like I would say, different and unique and wonderful, is that we're not just out there doing podcasts or writing blogs or saying, hey, women, you should not look at porn or masturbate. No, we're actually saying, let's get everybody together. Let's all get together and just be with each other in this, because, you know, man does not find himself except through a sincere gift of himself.
Yes.
And you will not be able to really experience yourself as the good that you are,
right,
except by the loving gaze of others around you. And so that's what happens, and that's what causes so much freedom.
Yes.
Is that we turn shame on its head a little bit, and we're like, no, that's not really true. You yourself are like really great. You're not bad.
Even when you're talking about this, you're loved and you're welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
You're welcome. And you're welcome here. And
you belong here.
Yes.
You belong here. You can be yourself.
And it loses its power. It loses its grip on people.
Yeah. That belonging rather than fitting in, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to be something. You don't need to achieve certain victories this week to belong here. You don't need to look a certain way or have a certain struggle, or just by nature of being yourself, you belong here in this group, right?
That's powerful.
So
that's a good word. That's a good word. I think that's a little bit of what you and I were talking about, just kind of as we wrap up, like some final thoughts from both of us, I think. But we were talking about that earlier, that and maybe this could be its own episode too, for the love of all that's good, but like just not making freedom look like a certain state in life. Like marriage is not a freedom.
Certain vocation.
Yeah, let's just say it how it is. It's marriage. And I ask, like, one of, our first session is desires and motivations and what motivates you. And I think to have a healthy marriage is a good and worthy motivation. If it's your only motivation, I think you're going to fail. It's going to fall.
You're going to fail. This is a somewhat recent discovery in my own life. I was walking just at like a 7-day Camino in Spain a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And I was reflecting on this as I was walking, that my own recovery has been like pretty heavily influenced by a desire for marriage, which is beautiful in and of itself.
Sure.
But I really came to like head to head with the fact that it needs to go even deeper. It needs to go even further than that. Yeah. And it's very possible that my vocation won't be marriage. I mean, only God knows this, Yeah. But that whatever the vocation is, like, I have to be wary not to lean too much on that hope for marriage as I'm recovering from these things, because actually just like in and of myself intrinsically, I'm worthy of living a life that's free from these compulsions. Yes. Regardless of what my state is presently or will be in the future, So like I used to always have this sort of like my number one pitfall where I knew I was going to fall into a setback would be if I gave up the hope of my vocation. And by vocation, I think I just mean marriage here, if I'm being honest. Okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. So if I gave up that hope that there is someone out there for me, that I could be lovable in that way, then I knew that if I gave up that hope, usually a setback follows. And that was an insight that really has served me well and still does serve me well. But it has to be even further than that. You need to allow for God's will for your life, His plan for your life, and His, I don't know. That was something that I've reflected on a lot recently too.
Yeah, and same, like, as a person who is married, it's like recognizing the fact too that getting married doesn't mean that you don't sin anymore. And I think that's what's dangerous
or
about,
have temptation anymore.
Oh yeah. And that's what's dangerous about, like, okay, again, to have hope for a healthy marriage and to have hope for a marriage that is pure and loving, it's a good desire and a good motivation. What we're talking about is if it's the only thing you have. Yeah. That's
or even the central, the top of the list of priorities of why you're motivated
like
against this.
If you're dangling marriage like a carrot on a stick, that's not going to help. But because that also makes marriage, it's like, okay, after I'm married, my sexuality will be whole, I will be complete, I will not fall anymore. And that's truly not the case.
So unfair to your future spouse as well. Yeah,
because sexuality within marriage is a journey of healing, and it's a journey of unity and just like everything else about marriage is a journey. Like it's a journey of communication, and you know, learning to be one person is a very complex thing. And so it's not like you arrive at marriage and then all of your wounds from sexual compulsions are gone. You know, it's those wounds come up and they must be addressed over and over again throughout your life. But I think, again, kind of how we're talking is like freedom gives you the space and the ability to address those wounds when they arise with a peace and a compassion towards yourself. That isn't possible when you're in addiction. You know, part of freedom is learning to be compassionate towards yourself and forgiving yourself for seeking out those sources and for being so subject to them, right. You know, but you learn compassion.
Yeah. And taking things as they come.
Yes.
When you're in the onslaught of sexual compulsion and it feels frenzied and crazy, you're kind of like the Terminator, like I must eliminate all the sin.
Yeah. Get me out of here now.
Right now. But I mean, yeah, realistically, everyone knows this. Everyone knows this in life. It's one day at a time.
Truly. Yeah.
You know, I used to hate it when people told me that. They'd be like, just take one day at a time.
It's like, what does that even mean?
Right. Especially when you're in the midst of so much suffering and turmoil. You're like, do not tell me that I need to continue living the rest of my life every day like this with all this suffering and turmoil. And I just need to take it one day at a time. Like, no, that's not what they meant. That's how I interpreted it in my angsty way. But truly, the recovery is one day at a time, and some days are full of joy. And I think the further you travel along it, the more days there are that are full of joy.
Very true.
So, yeah.
Agreed. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Yeah. I don't think we talked long enough,
I think we killed that topic.
Oh my gosh.
It's dead.
Well, shout out to our dear patron who suggested the topic of freedom. We hope you're satisfied. I
had fun.
So it was fun.
Thank you, whoever you are.
Yes. All right. Well, and if you liked this podcast, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, smash that follow button on whatever place you cast your pods, but also prayerfully consider supporting us as a patron on Patreon. We are filing our paperwork currently as a nonprofit, but we depend on donor support, and more than anything, we depend on the prayers of other people. So please consider supporting us financially through Patreon, or just commit to praying for us, because we're facing a beast, and it's a fun beast to face, but it's...
And we want freedom.
I can't.
But we're not going to wear the kilts. Okay?
No
Even
kilts.
If you send them to us.
No kilts.
And pray for us.
Oh, good Lord. Alrighty. All right. We'll catch you on the flippity flip, but join us again soon for our next episode. And thanks, Mary Jo.
Anytime.
Thanks for joining the conversation today on the Magdala podcast. If you want to learn more, join a support group with other women on the journey, or find more content, visit magdalaministries.org. If you want to continue to be a part of the conversation, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. But most importantly, wherever you are in the journey of healing, know that you're not alone and you don't have to hide anymore. We're excited to welcome you to the table next time. God bless.